A poor woman was fired from her restaurant, but a millionaire changed her life and gave her an incredible opportunity. The clatter of dishes. The dull thump of kitchen doors swinging open. A steam-burnished hum that rose like background music in the tiled heart of Manny's Diner on 3rd and Ashland. Cue soft, slow piano, nostalgic, a little mournful. There, under fluorescent lights that flattened color and hope, stood Darlene Miller, 37, apron smeared with grease and the faded stain of last Tuesday's marinara. Her hair was tied back in a frayed scrunchie, curls escaping like they didn't care about rules. Her sneakers were cheap, soaked through from a mop bucket accident earlier that afternoon. But her back was straight. Always. Even when she was bone-tired. She had 3 shifts left this week. Or so she thought. You missed table 4's refill again, Darlene. The voice belonged to Sandra, the manager with the permanent scowl and a clipboard like a weapon. Sandra didn't yell. She wielded quiet disappointment like a blade, sharper than any outburst. Darlene nodded, didn't argue. She had learned by now that defending herself only made it worse. So she picked up the pitcher of weak coffee and headed to table 4, where an old man in an army jacket didn't even look up when she refilled his cup. That was her life. Invisible. Polite. Efficient. And always on the edge of not enough. Her mind wandered as she scrubbed the counter by the pie display. Rent was due. The light bill was late. Jonah needed new sneakers. Her 8-year-old had been stuffing tissue into the soles of his current pair. When she caught him, he shrugged and said, "They still work, Mama. Don't worry." That kid had more grace in him than most adults she knew. But now, with her hands in lemon-scented soap and thoughts drifting toward tomorrow's coupon stack, she felt something shift. A tremor. Darlene. My office. Now. No one in that diner looked at her as she untied her apron and walked past the fry station. Not even Mikey, the busboy who called her Miss D, like she was royalty. Not even the cook who sometimes slipped her extra fries for Jonah's school lunch. Behind the office door, Sandra didn't waste time. We're cutting hours. You're not the fastest, and frankly, there've been complaints. Darlene swallowed. Complaints? Sandra didn't blink. It's not personal. It's just business. Just business. Those words landed like bricks. By the time she stepped back into the alley behind the diner, her apron in her hands, the wind had picked up. Cold and sharp. February had no mercy in Chicago. She stood by the dumpster, staring at her hands. They were red from scrubbing, nails bitten down, callous from years of labor that no longer paid. For a minute, just a minute, she let herself cry. Not loud. Not desperate. Just quiet tears that cut clean lines down her cheeks. Fade to. A black SUV idling across the street. Tinted windows. Gleaming finish. The kind of vehicle that looked like it belonged in a different city. A different life. Inside it sat Elias Grant, 45, CEO of HarborTech Ventures, worth somewhere around $120 million if you believed Forbes, which he didn't. He didn't believe much of anything these days. He'd flown in that morning to scout a property for his foundation. A new community incubator, they said. Urban renewal, impact investing, all the words his team threw around like candy at a parade. He just wanted out of the boardroom. He hadn't expected to find himself parked in front of a dingy diner, watching a woman cry in the cold. And he didn't know why it stopped him, why she stopped him, but it did. Not the tears. The way she stood back up. Like she'd remembered she didn't have time to cry. Like resilience was muscle memory. He watched her shove the apron into her tote bag, square her shoulders, and walk away. She passed under the orange flicker of the broken streetlight, vanishing into the night. Something in him moved. "James," he said to the driver. "Who was that woman?" The driver blinked. "Which one?" "The one who just left the diner. Can you find out her name?" The driver raised an eyebrow. "You want me to Google a waitress?" Elias didn't look away from the window. "No. I want to know who she is." Because for the first time in months, maybe years, Something in him had shifted too. The apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the radiator and the soft click of Jonah's crayons as he drew on the living room floor. The walls were thin, the ceiling water-stained in the corners, and the front door still had that loose hinge that moaned like an old man with arthritis. Darlene stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, dishes stacked like a fortress. Her hands moved automatically, scrub, rinse, dry, but her mind was miles away. "Mama, do dinosaurs get cold?" Jonah's voice floated over, high and sincere. She smiled, despite everything. "Depends on the dinosaur, baby. I bet the fuzzy ones were cozy." He grinned, pleased. He was drawing a stegosaurus with a winter hat. She looked at him for a moment, really looked. His socks didn't match, and there was a tiny hole in his elbow. His cheeks were round, still childlike, but his eyes were old. Older than they should have been. Because he saw everything. And Darlene had no answers tonight. Not one. Cue a soft knock at the door. One. Then two. She froze. No one came by this late. Not unless something was wrong. Her sister lived 2 buses away and didn't own a coat thick enough to travel in this weather. She wiped her hands, her heart ticking faster now. Stepping to the door, she peeked through the peephole. Nothing. But then, a black envelope slid under the door, its edges clean and sharp. No return address. Just her name in white ink. Darlene Miller. She stared at it like it might bite. "Mama?" She put a hand on Jonah's head. "It's okay, baby. Just a letter." She waited until he went back to coloring before she picked it up and opened it. Inside, one crisp card. Heavy stock. Embossed. "You are invited. To a private luncheon and business proposal. Hosted by Elias Grant. March 4th, 12 p.m. Grant Building, 42nd floor. Transportation will be provided. RSVP not required." Her heart tripped over itself. Elias Grant? As in the man on magazine covers? The guy who invented those smart city hubs? The one who looked like he belonged in a suit more than most men belonged in their own skin? She looked again. No scam language. No fine print. Just those few lines, like an invitation to another planet. Was this a joke? Some weird social experiment? Or was this real? The next morning, she almost threw the card out. Twice. But she didn't. Instead, she folded it into her coat pocket and dropped Jonah off at school early. She told him she had a weird grown-up thing to do and kissed the top of his head. When she stepped outside, there it was. A black town car. Engine humming. A driver stepped out in a wool coat and nodded. "Miss Miller?" She hesitated. "That depends. Mr. Grant is expecting you." The ride through downtown was like a movie in reverse, everything getting sleeker, taller, shinier. She tried not to stare, but her eyes betrayed her. Billboards. People in suits with lattes and earpieces. Sidewalks without cracks. When they pulled up to the Grant Building, she nearly laughed. Not out loud. But that short, breathless kind of laugh that says, "I do not belong here." Marble lobby. A woman at the desk who looked like she'd never chipped a nail. "Miss Miller. Mr. Grant is waiting for you upstairs." She took the elevator alone. 42 floors of mirror and silence. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space so white and open it barely felt real. And there he was. Elias Grant. Leaning against a long window, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. His hair was perfectly unbothered. His watch probably cost more than her rent for the year. But when he turned and saw her, he smiled. Not the PR smile. Not the one she'd seen in online interviews. A real one. Small. Gentle. Curious. Darlene. He said it like they were old friends. Like he'd been waiting. "You came." She stood there, coat still on, fingers twitching inside her sleeves. "Is this some kind of program? Are you giving away free sandwiches or something?" He laughed. It surprised her. And him, maybe. No. No sandwiches. He gestured toward a small round table set by the window. 2 chairs. A tray of tea, pastries that looked too fancy to eat. Can I explain? She didn't sit. Not yet. You followed me. After work. I did. That's creepy. He nodded. Fair. But I wasn't following you. I saw you. That night. And something about the way you stood back up. He paused. You reminded me of someone. Someone I lost. The room shifted. Something cracked open in the air between them. Darlene sat. Not because she trusted him yet, but because there was a kindness in his voice that felt lonely. And that loneliness she recognized. It was her own. There was silence between them for a moment. Darlene, sitting stiff in the plush chair, her thrift store coat swallowing her frame, and Elias Grant, looking like a man too rich to be real but somehow not performing. The kind of silence where things start to matter. Let me ask you something, Elias said, pouring tea into 2 fine porcelain cups. The kind with rims thin as paper. Do you ever think about what you'd do if life gave you one wild second chance? Darlene raised an eyebrow. You mean like the lottery? He smiled. I mean something you didn't ask for. Something strange. Unfair, even. But maybe right. She picked up her tea but didn't drink. Her hands were cold. The cup was warm. This is all real nice, Mr. Grant, but I don't have time for riddles. I got a kid who's probably trading his apple slices for a PB&J right about now, and I gotta figure out how to explain why I'm not working anymore. His face changed, just a flicker, but the softness didn't leave his voice. That's why I wanted to talk to you. Not because I pity you. Not because I think you're a project. But because I saw something in you most people try to buy and fake and mimic, and never quite get. He leaned forward. You're resilient. You got knocked down, and you stood up with grace. Quiet grace. That's rare. And I've built a company full of people who are brilliant, but most of them have never had to climb. Now she laughed, but it wasn't joyful. More of a low, tired sound that carried weight. So what, you want to hire me? You need a waitress on the 42nd floor to balance out the spreadsheets? Close, he said. But no. I don't want you in the background. I want you to run something. Her mouth went dry. Excuse me? He reached into a folder and pulled out a thin packet, sliding it across the table. She didn't touch it. He tapped it gently. Harbor Tech is opening a new social impact initiative, a network of community cafes that double as job training hubs and tech literacy spaces. We've got the funding. The infrastructure. What we don't have is someone who understands the heartbeat of working-class neighborhoods. Someone who's been there. She stared at the packet. You want me to run a business? With support. With mentorship. But yes. You'd be the face. The soul of it. She looked up, suspicion creeping in now. Why me? His voice lowered. Steadier now. Because most of my life, I've surrounded myself with people who remind me of me. And all that's gotten me is money and silence. He looked down at his hands. His nails were too perfect, but they were shaking, barely. I lost my mother when I was 10. She was a cleaner. Woke up every day at 4 a.m. Had the same tired hands you do now. And she died never hearing anyone say she mattered. His voice cracked on that last word. And Darlene suddenly didn't feel like she was across from a billionaire anymore. She felt like she was sitting with a boy who missed his mother. She picked up the folder, hands trembling. Inside was a plan. Real, detailed. Her name already typed on some of the internal drafts. They weren't playing. You give this to everyone who looks tired in an alley? He grinned. No. Just you. Cue a moment of quiet. Just breath and city sounds faint in the background. I don't have a degree. Don't care. I don't know how to run a business. We'll teach you. And what if I fail? He leaned back, thoughtful. Then you fail honestly. And we both learn something. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no. Instead, she looked out the window. The skyline stretched forever, sharp and proud. But down below, where the blocks turned gray and cracked, was her world. And suddenly she realized she could be the bridge. Later, after they'd finished their tea and gone over the proposal, after he'd walked her to the elevator himself and said, "Think about it." Truly. She stepped back into the city. It was colder now. But she felt different. Like a door had opened inside her. One she hadn't dared touch before. That night, Jonah sat cross-legged on the couch, eating a microwaved burrito. "Mama, you smell fancy." She blinked. "I do?" "Yeah. Like the fancy part of Target." She laughed. "Thanks, baby." He tilted his head. "Did the weird grown-up thing go okay?" She sat beside him and pulled him close. It might have been the start of something real weird, and real good. The building on Morgan and Ninth had once been a bakery. The kind of place where old men argued over chess and powdered sugar floated in the air like snow. Now it was abandoned. Windows boarded. Paint peeling like it had given up. Darlene stood on the sidewalk, bundled in her thickest coat, staring up at it with a mix of awe and rising nausea. This was it. The flagship location. The first of many, Elias had said. She had the keys in her hand. In her hand. The iron felt cold, almost sacred. Like something from another life. And maybe it was. She opened the door. The scent of dust, old flour, and time hit her all at once. The floor creaked. Sunlight sliced through cracks in the plywood, catching the floating particles midair. She stepped inside. Each footfall echoed. This was the test. Not a metaphorical one. A real, physical, boots-on-the-ground test. Elias had secured the building. His team would help fund the renovations. But the vision? The people? The menu? The soul? That had to come from her. The next morning, she was there by 7. No more diner shifts. No more aprons stained with fryer oil. Just her, a battered notebook, a broken coffee pot, and a promise she didn't fully believe in yet. But she was showing up. That was her superpower. She started with a list. Things I know. People want to feel warm. Free coffee gets them in. Dignity is not a luxury. Everybody's got a story. By noon, the door creaked open. She looked up, startled. It was a man in overalls. Heavy boots. Face lined like tree bark. He looked around the empty space and squinted. "You the new owner?" She blinked. "Trying to be." He nodded, stepped inside like he was testing the floor's patience. "Name's Benny. I used to deliver bread here, back in the 90s. My cousin said someone was fixin' this place up." She smiled, unsure. "That's the idea." Benny scratched his chin. "Need help with demo?" She blinked again. "You offering? I got a sledgehammer in my truck and nothing better to do." She hesitated. Then, "I pay in bad coffee and good company." He grinned. "Deal." That's how it started. One by one, people showed up. Old neighbors. Curious passers-by. A teenage girl named Lana who skipped class but asked if she could paint the windows. A retired electrician. A mom who said her son needed somewhere to be after school. She didn't post a flyer. She didn't go viral. She just left the door open. Elias came by on day 6. He stepped carefully over extension cords and paint cans, raising an eyebrow as Lana waved a dripping brush at him like a sword. "This your army?" Darlene crossed her arms, a smear of paint on her cheek. "Something like that." He looked around, clearly impressed. "No branding consultant. No PR rollout. Just real people." She shrugged. "It's not perfect. But it's ours." Then, quieter. "And it's the first thing that's felt like mine in a long time." Elias nodded. He didn't say much. But he stayed. Rolled up his sleeves. Spackled a hole in the wall, badly. Took a picture with Lana for her Instagram. Smiled when Benny offered him a hammer. That night, Darlene walked through the half-painted space, alone. She ran her fingers along the window frame. And for the first time in her life, she imagined something growing from her hands that wasn't survival. A place. A legacy. Something Jonah could point to and say, "My mom built that." Cue soft piano theme returning, humble, hopeful. Cut to her apartment, late. Jonah asleep. Darlene at the kitchen table, scribbling ideas. She was planning a menu. But it wasn't about food. It was about comfort. Familiar things. Nothing too trendy. Just what people missed. Biscuits like her mama used to make. A soup night. Pay what you can. Board. And one wall set aside for job postings and stories. Real stories. Photos. Little blurbs like, "Tasha got promoted this week. Ask her about it. Mr. Lee makes the best dumplings. We're trying to convince him to teach a class. Looking for work? Talk to Benny." It wasn't a restaurant. It was a village. And still, in the quiet of that night, doubt crept in like a draft under the door. What if this fell apart? What if people stopped showing up? What if she was just playing house in someone else's dream? She closed her eyes. Then she heard it. A whisper, maybe only in her head. "You stood up with grace." And she remembered. That was enough, for now. Rain tapped the windows like polite company. Not a storm, not a drizzle. Just that soft, persistent kind of rain that makes cities look like watercolor paintings. It was March 4th, exactly 1 month since Darlene had stood behind Manny's diner in the alley, apron in her hands and tears on her cheeks. And now? She stood behind a reclaimed maple counter, staring at a smudged chalkboard that read, "Welcome to the window, coffee, comfort, community." Below it, suggested prices. Pay what you can. Everyone welcome. Her hands were shaking. Not violently. Just enough. Her palms were slick, breath shallow. Not from fear, no, she'd passed that stage. This was something deeper. Reverence. As if she'd built something fragile, and now the world was coming to touch it. Lana had lit little candles in jars along the window sills. Benny was still in the back, fixing a shelf that refused to stay up. And Elias? He was late. She wasn't surprised. He didn't exactly fit in when he showed up. His leather shoes squeaked against the linoleum, and people kept asking if he was a city inspector, but he tried. She liked him for that. And she hadn't admitted it, but she wanted him here. Today. At 9:06 a.m., the door opened. The first customer was a woman with silver hair, plastic bags around her shoes to fight the rain. "Am I early?" Darlene smiled. "No such thing." She poured a mug of coffee. Black. Simple. And just like that, the window was open. By 10 o'clock, 5 tables were full. A father with a toddler asleep on his chest. A woman in scrubs, scrolling her phone with one hand and eating a biscuit with the other. 2 teenage boys sharing fries, talking fast and laughing louder. Nobody asked for receipts. Nobody asked for permission. Darlene moved through the space like a conductor, refilling mugs, wiping counters, checking in with every guest like they were family. Because in a way they were. Or could be. Still, there was a part of her scanning the door. Waiting. Hoping. And then he walked in. Cue soft, reverent musical tone. Not triumphant, gentle. Like recognition. Elias. In a charcoal coat, raindrops clinging to his collar. He looked around slowly, quietly. He saw the bulletin board. The help wanted slips. The note that read, "Jonah's Cookie of the Week," next to a tray of thumbprint cookies. And then he saw her. They didn't say anything at first. She just walked over, wiped her hands on her apron, this one clean, stitched with the window in soft blue thread, and said, "Well, we're not dead yet." He chuckled. "No. You're very much alive." They sat in the back booth. Darlene sipped tea, too tired for coffee. Elias, uncharacteristically quiet, looked around like he was trying to memorize the place. "I've funded things before," he said finally. "Big things. Clinics. Maker labs. Libraries. But this. He paused. This feels like it breathes. She raised an eyebrow. So I pass? You already passed. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Consider this your full funding approval. Renovation budget, salaries, and a year's lease for the second location. Her hands went still. Second location? You're not building a café, Darlene. You're building a movement. She stared at the envelope. Didn't open it. Couldn't. What if it changes me? He tilted his head. Has it so far? She looked around the room. At Benny showing Jonah how to balance a salt shaker on a spoon. At Lana sketching something in a notebook while listening to a girl sing quietly at the community piano. At the teenage boys putting their leftover fries in a to-go box with a note that said, "Give to someone who missed lunch." "No," she said quietly. "Not yet." Outside, the rain slowed. Not stopped. Just softened. Like it understood something beautiful was happening here, and didn't want to interrupt. Then the door creaked open again. And in walked Sandra, the manager from the diner. Still in her black polyester blazer. Still clutching a clipboard. Darlene froze. Their eyes met. And for a second, the room disappeared. "Can I sit?" Sandra asked. Darlene blinked. Nodded. Sandra ordered coffee. No food. Just a drink. She stirred it 4 times before speaking. "I saw the article. About this place. Didn't realize it was you." Darlene said nothing. Sandra looked up. "I wasn't kind to you." It wasn't an apology. Not quite. But it was something. "No," Darlene said. "You weren't." A long pause. Sandra sipped her coffee. "It's good," she said. "Better than Manny's." Darlene almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she walked away. Because she had tables to wipe. Because some people show up with apologies, and some show up with memories. And some just need a warm drink to sit with their ghosts. 2 weeks after the opening, the window was alive. There was rhythm now. A pulse. People had their favorite seats, favorite mugs, favorite muffins. Jonah had started a tip jar labeled, "For extra sprinkles," and somehow it was always half full by noon. But with growth came gravity. And cracks. Darlene was behind the counter prepping a tray of cornbread when she noticed Lana storming out the back door, paint-stained jeans and all, her face flushed. She followed her outside, letting the screen door snap shut behind them. "Lana?" The girl turned, wiping her eyes fast. "Nothing. It's fine." That was a pretty dramatic nothing. Lana exhaled hard, shoulders tight. "It's Benny. He said I shouldn't be painting in the cafe. That it's a serious place. Like I'm some kid playing." Darlene frowned. "You've been painting that back wall since day one." "Exactly. I've been here. I helped build this place. But the second real stuff starts happening, press, photos, city folks sniffing around, suddenly, I'm a distraction." She kicked a loose rock, angry. "You said this place was for everyone." Darlene felt that one like a body blow. "It is." Lana looked at her, eyes sharp now. "Then you better say it louder. 'Cause not everyone's hearing it." She walked off, hoodie pulled over her head. Back inside, Benny was fixing a leg on table 3, his toolbox open beside him. Darlene crouched down, voice calm but firm. "What happened with Lana?" Benny didn't look up. "She was painting a giant hummingbird on the bathroom wall." "Bathroom D? So this place ain't an art show. We got a vibe now. You bring in investors or donors or whatever, first thing they're gonna say is what's with the graffiti. It's not graffiti, Benny. It's expression. It's her." He wiped his hands on a rag. "It's yours now. Not mine. Just thought you wanted to keep it clean." That word sat heavy between them. Clean. As if neatness had ever saved anybody. That night Darlene sat on her couch, the business envelope from Elias unopened beside her. She hadn't touched it in a week. Jonah was asleep in his favorite blanket burrito on the floor. The room was dim. Quiet. Except for the steady spin of her thoughts. She thought about Lana's face. About the community board she'd built where stories lived side by side, some messy, some raw, all real. She thought about her own life, scrubbed and polished for years just to pass. And she thought about power. How easy it was to use it without realizing. How easy it was to become the thing you once feared. The next morning, she arrived early. Before the muffins. Before the regulars. Before Benny. She stood in front of the bathroom wall. The hummingbird wasn't done. But it was beautiful. Wings mid-flap. Colors defiant. Its chest facing a storm painted in broad gray strokes, unfinished. She picked up a brush. And painted the sun breaking through. At noon, Lana walked in, expecting silence or scolding. Instead, she found Darlene crouched by the wall, paint on her apron. Lana blinked. You finished it? Darlene shook her head. No. I added to it. If we're gonna fly through storms, we might as well show the sky fighting back. Lana didn't say anything right away. Then, Benny's gonna lose it. Darlene stood up, smiling. He'll be fine. And if he's not, he'll still fix the chairs. But the next challenge didn't come from inside. It came from the neighborhood council. A letter. Polite, polished, and firm. Concerns have been raised regarding the lack of permits, unusual zoning usage, and safety certifications for the Windows community programs and evening events. Elias read it over coffee, brows furrowed. They're not shutting you down. Yet. But this is pressure. You're making noise. Darlene's chest tightened. I thought that's what they wanted. Change, revitalization. He nodded. As long as they control it. She looked out the window. A young man was teaching a 10-year-old how to play chess at table 6. A girl was braiding her grandmother's hair at table 2. Control? This wasn't control. This was life. That night she gathered everyone, staff, volunteers, regulars, right there in the café. Rain again, soft against the glass. I need your help, she said. They might come for this place. With rules, with codes. And maybe some of that's fair. But if they take the soul out of it, it won't matter if the doors stay open. It'll be empty. Silence. Then Benny stood up. You tell me where to hammer. Then Lana. I'll design flyers. Get people talking. Then others. Nods. Murmurs. Agreements. They weren't just customers anymore. They were keepers. Monday morning. The sky was too clear, the kind that warned you more than it calmed you, like it was holding its breath. Darlene stood in front of the window, keys in hand, staring at the folded notice of compliance review taped to the glass. The city's logo stamped in the top corner. Bold. Unapologetic. They were coming. Not. Someday. Not. Maybe. Tomorrow. Fire inspection. Health inspection. Zoning compliance. And a quiet, unspoken warning tucked between the lines. This place doesn't belong in the plan. Inside, Benny was replacing a light bulb that buzzed every time the toaster got used. He saw the paper in her hands before she spoke. Let me guess, he muttered. They're sending in the suits. She nodded. Tomorrow. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Well, we've seen worse. She wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe all the patchwork they'd done, the fire extinguishers, the safety plan, the volunteer training, would be enough. But this wasn't about safety. It was about presence. And hers was inconvenient. Cut to. Later that day, Elias arrived in silence. No coat, no briefcase. Just sleeves rolled up and something serious in his eyes. He stood by the counter as she prepped trays of peach muffins. They're not playing around, he said. She didn't stop working. Neither are we. He watched her for a moment. There's something else. She froze. He reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the counter. Thicker than the one before. Labeled. Expansion Proposal, Midtown Project. She stared at it. Didn't touch it. You're giving me more work? I'm giving you options, he said. A safety net. If this one goes down, we keep going. Somewhere safer. Somewhere easier. She wiped flour from her hands. You know what the problem with easier is? He didn't answer. She looked at him, voice quiet but firm. You stopped showing up for the people who never got easy. That night, Lana came in after hours, hoodie soaked from rain, earbuds tangled. She dropped a stack of papers on the counter. Flyers. Posters. Social media snapshots. All titled, "The window belongs here." You said make noise. She grinned. I made noise. Darlene flipped through them. One had a photo of Mr. Lee teaching dumpling folding to a group of kids. Another was of the community board, where someone had written in Sharpie, I found my people here. Another was of her, Darlene, smiling behind the counter, Jonah standing beside her, his extra sprinkles jar in hand. She felt something press into her throat. Not tears. Not yet. But the weight of being seen. The next day. 9:17 a.m. 3 men and 1 woman entered. Suits. Clipboards. Flat expressions. Darlene greeted them with warm muffins and cooler nerves. Good morning. You're just in time for the peach batch. They didn't laugh. Didn't smile. But they began their checklist. One walked into the kitchen. Another inspected the fire alarms. The woman stood by the bulletin board, frowning at a post that read, Free coats in back, take what you need. Darlene stood tall. Any questions, I'm right here. An hour passed. Then 2. Word had gotten out. Locals started showing up, not to interfere, just to be present. One by one, they filled the café. Not loud. Not angry. Just there. A kind of peaceful defiance. Jonah passed out cookies. Mr. Lee made green tea. A woman from the shelter down the block stood near the window with her baby, bouncing her gently. The inspectors noticed. Darlene noticed them noticing. When it was over, the lead inspector handed her the form. We'll file the report. He looked around one last time. His eyes lingered on the piano. On Lana's mural. On the mural's son. Then he nodded, barely, and walked out. That night, the cafe stayed open late. People brought potluck dishes. Someone played guitar. A kid recited a poem about walking to school in worn-out sneakers and never wanting to feel invisible again. And Darlene? She didn't stand in the spotlight. She cleaned up spilled juice. Wrapped leftover cornbread. Picked up crayons from the floor. Because leadership, real leadership, was quiet work. Elias leaned beside her in the doorway as the last guests trickled out. You didn't need my folder after all. She looked at him, eyes soft but steady. Maybe one day. But not as a backup plan. He smiled. You're building more than a business, you know. She nodded. I know. She looked at her hands. Still worn. Still cracked. But no longer empty. Applause is loud. But resentment? Resentment is quiet. It creeps in the back door. It doesn't ring the bell. It slips through cracks and waits in corners. And when you start to rise, especially when you rise from nothing, it starts to whisper. Who does she think she is? 2 weeks after the inspection, the window had become more than a cafe. It was a signal. The neighborhood newsletter ran a feature on it. A local news segment showed Darlene plating biscuits with Jonah beside her. Volunteers came from across the city. A law student offered to help with nonprofit paperwork pro bono. And not everyone liked it. Cut to Thursday morning. Darlene arrived to find the back door unlatched. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. But the bulletin board? Torn down. Every photo, every job posting, every handwritten hope, gone. On the wall, in thick black marker, someone had scrawled. Not everyone's impressed. Boss lady. The quote mark stung the most. Like her title, her leadership, was a costume. She stared at it, breath caught between her ribs. Lana walked in moments later, earbuds in, humming something under her breath. When she saw the wall, her hum stopped. What the hell? Darlene put a hand up, gently. Don't. Just help me fix it. By noon, the board was back up. Tape and tacks and a new headline in thick red letters. Still here. Still yours. The marker on the wall remained. She left it. Like a scar. Like proof. That evening, Elias stopped by late, carrying 2 steaming cartons of takeout and a face full of questions. You didn't tell me. She shrugged. What's there to say? Someone didn't clap. He handed her a container. This kind of visibility? It comes with shadows. She sat across from him at the back booth. They shared noodles, the quiet kind of meal people eat when there's more to say than either of them wants to admit. You ever feel like the second you start believing in yourself, someone shows up to remind you why you shouldn't? He swallowed. Looked out the window. Every day. But I've got more mirrors than people. That helps. She smirked. Figures. But later that night, after Jonah was asleep and the dishes were done, Darlene pulled out a shoebox from the top of the closet. Inside were envelopes. Old ones? Final notices. Eviction threats. The pink slip from Manny's diner. And one unopened birthday card from her sister, 6 years old now. They hadn't spoken since the fight. Since Darlene had said something she couldn't unsay. She stared at it. Then put it back. Some wounds were too layered. Some silences too loud. The next morning brought a new challenge. A man in a gray jacket showed up just before opening. He was early 40s. Well kept. With the kind of face that used to smile more than it did now. He looked familiar. You're Darlene Miller? Yes. He handed her a folded paper. No letterhead. Just black ink on white. We represent former employee Darlene Miller in regard to a private debt incurred in 2017, totaling $6,482.19 with interest. This letter constitutes official notice of our intention to collect. Her mouth went dry. This debt was closed. It was never discharged. The lender sold it. He left without another word. Just like that. A ghost knocking on her new door. She sat down in the storage closet. Lights off. Door closed. It was the only place in the cafe without a view. She put her head in her hands. She had $6,000 to her name. Total. That was the safety net. The real one. And now someone wanted to cut it out from under her. Knock, knock. It was Jonah. Mama? She opened the door. He looked up at her, holding a napkin with a cookie folded inside. You forgot to eat. She crouched down, took the cookie. Thank you, baby. He touched her cheek. Don't let the bad stuff make your face tired. She blinked. What do you mean? When you get worried, you smile with your mouth but not your eyes. I like when your eyes smile, too. That night she called Elias. Can I ask something stupid? Always. If I lose everything again, what do I do? There was a pause. Then, you start again. And I'll show up. Again. She didn't sleep much. But in the morning, she got dressed, made Jonah's lunch, and opened the cafe. Same as ever. Except now? She was building not in the absence of pressure, but under it. She wrote a new sign for the window. Open hearts. Open doors. No perfection required. Because she was tired of pretending. And because someone out there needed to read it. The letter sat on the counter for 3 days. Folded neatly. Edges sharp. Like it had teeth. $6,482.19. A number that followed her into sleep, into dreams where the cafe lights wouldn't turn on and the floor caved in beneath her feet. Every time she tried to run, she was back in her old apartment, the one with the leaky ceiling and eviction notices piling up on the fridge. Jonah would say, Mama, we're okay, right? And she'd lie. In the dream, and sometimes now, in real life. Because when you're the strong one, nobody checks to see if you're cracking. She didn't tell Elias. Not yet. Didn't tell Ben either. He'd just hand her a coffee and a solution she couldn't afford. I know a guy, he'd say. But Darlene was done owing guys. Instead, she tried to earn her way out. Extra catering. Weekend hours. She even helped a bakery across town that needed temporary prep help. Late nights, long bus rides, less time with Jonah. It was old hustle. She wore it like a second skin. Then one morning, as she refilled the sugar canisters, the past walked in wearing leather shoes and regret. Marcus. She hadn't seen him in 6 years. Not since he'd left her with a newborn, 2 maxed-out credit cards, and a pile of dreams he never planned to stick around for. Now he stood in the window's doorway, holding a cappuccino from somewhere fancier and smiling like nothing had happened. You look good, Dee. She froze. The air felt thin. What do you want? He walked in like he belonged. Heard you were doing big things. Place looks amazing. You didn't answer the question. He took off his sunglasses, letting them hang on his shirt. I got a message from a collections agency. Said you were the primary, but we were both on the loan. Remember that car? The blue one? She clenched her jaw. That loan had been his idea. He'd used her name because his credit was trash. Promised he'd handle it. Then disappeared. You're telling me this why? Because I paid it off. Silence. You what? Used part of my bonus. I've got a decent gig now. And I figured, since you're all famous and successful and stuff, I'd come settle it, man to woman. Clean slate. She stared at him. No emotion. No thank you. No reunion swelling in her chest. Just empty. So you paid it off. After it nearly ruined me. It's paid. That's what matters. She nodded once. Slowly. Why'd you really come? He hesitated. I was hoping maybe you'd let me see him. Jonah. Just a few minutes? Everything in her tensed. Jonah. Her Jonah. The boy she raised. Federal bathed. Calmed during thunderstorms and sang to when he cried over broken crayons. Marcus had never bought a box of them. Never once asked how the kid was growing up. But now that there was light on her, he wanted to step into it. No, she said quietly. No. You don't just drop in when the road looks smooth. You don't get to meet the kid whose life you stepped out of because you feel generous now. He swallowed. I just thought maybe. Don't think. Not about him. Not about me. She turned and walked back behind the counter. And for the first time, didn't look back. That night, when she tucked Jonah in, he asked, Mama, did you know some kids have 2 daddies? She smiled gently. I've heard rumors. He rolled onto his side. I don't need 2. 1 you is enough. She kissed the back of his head and whispered. That's all I ever wanted to be. The next morning, a check arrived in the mail. $6,482.19. Signed Marcus Hayes. Nothing else in the envelope. No note. No apology. Just that figure, crisp on the page. Darlene stared at it for a long time. Then folded it. Slipped it into her donation jar behind the counter. The one labeled Emergency Angel Fund, for the next someone. She wasn't keeping it. She'd already paid. In years. In tears. In nights alone. When Elias came by later, she finally told him. About the debt. About Marcus. About how close she'd come to folding. He didn't flinch. He just looked at her, like always, like she wasn't a woman unraveling, but one weaving something stronger than anyone else saw. You still good? He asked. She nodded. Better. Not easier. But better. He leaned on the counter. This place is going to be something bigger than either of us thought. She glanced out the window. A man was helping an elderly woman read a job posting. A high school girl was doing homework with a cup of cocoa beside her. It already is, she whispered. June. The light was different now. Golden. Kind. The kind that filtered through leaves and windows like it wanted to be there. At the window, the ceiling fans hummed. The fresh paint no longer smelled sharp. Every chair had a story. Every mug had lips it belonged to. And the counter? The counter had become an altar. Of comfort. Of hope. Of second, third, fourth chances. Darlene stood near the front, holding a clipboard that no longer felt foreign in her hand. Her hair was up, curls pinned with purpose. Her apron read Founder, a gift from Lana, hand-stitched in blue thread. She was preparing for the biggest event yet. Community table night. No menus. No prices. Just a long table, dragged out onto the sidewalk with folding chairs from a church down the street. One rule. Everyone eats. Together. Benny had grilled ribs out back. Lana was chalking, welcome, on the sidewalk. Mr. Lee had donated steamed buns by the tray. And Jonah? Jonah was in charge of the music. He stood near the speaker with a playlist he'd made himself. The first song? A soft guitar track she used to hum while folding laundry. He'd remembered. Elias arrived just before sunset, sleeves rolled to the elbow, a bag of fresh rolls under one arm. He looked around and whistled low. You turned a hole in the wall into a heartbeat. She smiled, wiping her hands on a towel. We did. He tilted his head. You ever gonna take that title off? She looked down at her apron. Not yet. As the sun dipped low, the table filled. Cops sat next to bus drivers. Kids next to teachers. Retired nurses, new mothers, men who hadn't been smiled at in a week. No one asked where anyone worked, or what they owned. They passed cornbread. They poured sweet tea. They listened. Midway through the meal, Jonah stood up. Cleared his throat. Hi, I'm Jonah. People smiled. A few clapped. He held up a card. I wrote something for my mom. But I want everyone to hear it. Darlene froze. Her breath caught somewhere between her ribs and her heart. Jonah began to read. My mom used to come home smelling like fries. She'd be tired, but she'd still smile when I showed her my drawings. She made noodles better than restaurants, and told me bedtime stories where I was always the hero. Then she lost her job. I didn't really know what that meant. Just that she hugged me longer and looked out the window more. Now she runs a place where people come to feel better. Some cry. Some laugh. Some eat 6 biscuits and leave a napkin that says thank you. I don't know much about business. But I know when people are proud. And I see it every day. In her. And in all of you. I think that's the point. Not just starting again. But making space for others to start too. So, thanks for coming to my mom's long table. The last line cracked his voice. People stood and clapped. Not politely. Loudly. Wholeheartedly. Benny wiped his eyes with a napkin. Lana hugged Jonah tight. Elias nodded once, hand over his heart. And Darlene? She didn't hide her tears. Not this time. Afterward, as the crowd lingered under string lights and warm night air, Elias found her by the door. He handed her a plain envelope. She opened it. Inside, a deed. To the window. Signed over to her name. She looked up, stunned. What is this? The final piece. I was holding it. In case things got hard. In case you changed your mind. And now? Now I know you're not going anywhere. And neither is this. She stared at the paper. Owner. Not borrower. Not placeholder. Owner. She folded it slowly. Tucked it into her pocket like something sacred. Later, when the crowd had gone and the last dishes were stacked, Darlene stood at the long table alone. Hands on the wood. Eyes closed. The smell of ribs still in the air. The faint echo of laughter. And that deep, warm knowing that she hadn't just survived. She'd built something that would outlive her. She sat at the head of the table. Not to claim it. But to rest. For the first time in years she felt it settle in her bones. She was allowed to rest. Not because everything was perfect, but because she no longer carried it all alone.